The blue waters of Kepler 442b were not blue anymore. They were a deep, bruised color like an old wound that refused to heal. When the twin suns rose, the sea caught their light but did not sing. It only shivered. Waves slapped the broken edges of a drowned city, and the sound was hard and hollow. Ray Morgan stood knee-deep in that water with a wrench between her teeth and a pump housing open at her hands. Salt stung the soft scars on her wrists. The pump was supposed to filter trace toxins and algae from the outflow line that served quarter 7. Today it coughed red foam. Ray spat out the wrench, bent close, and listened the way field medics listen to a bad lung. "Come on," she murmured. "Breathe for me." A soft clicking came from behind. Neris had arrived, quiet as always. The Zapirian's scales were the color of midnight glass, but red lesions crawled from her jaw to her neck like spilled paint. She kept them covered with a woven mantle of kelp fiber, not to hide them. Ray had learned the Zapirians were not ashamed of sickness, but to keep the salty air from hurting. "It is the wrong song, Ray," Neris said, voice low, musical. "The pump sings like a broken shell." Ray grinned around a sweat-wet lip. "That's the technical term, yeah." She reached in, felt the grit jammed under the turbine blade, and fished out a hard lump the size of a child's tooth. It was red and rough. It left a smear on her thumb. Neris stiffened when she saw it. "Crimson bloom," she whispered. "Not a pathogen," Ray said fast, the way she always did now, words like habit. "A mineral complex kicked up by radiation and heat. It clumps in your water, your gardens, your lungs. It is dangerous, yes, but it is not contagious." Neris's crest fins rose and fell. She wrapped both arms around herself as if holding a memory in place. "The Coalition did not believe your words," she said softly. "They did not come to listen in person. They spun iron around our sky instead." Ray twisted the turbine free, cleaned it with a cloth, and set it back. "Coalition didn't listen because listening is slow and fear is easy." She bit the inside of her cheek. She tasted copper old anger. "Try it now." Neris stepped closer and placed one palm on the pump's throat. The Zapirian's red vibrations like text. The machine hummed low, then higher, and the green light on the panel held steady. Neris's shoulders loosened. "Better," she said. "Thank you." Ray leaned back and wiped her hands on her coveralls. "You keep us alive on the data side. I keep us alive on the broken metal side. Fair trade." Neris smiled with only half her mouth. "It is not a fair trade, Ray. You could fly away if you did not keep helping us." "Could," Ray said, looking out across the drowned market where a dozen skiffs bobbed between collapsed towers and drifting stalls. "But won't." 3 years ago, Ray's med freighter had come down in the storm of the blockade, slipping through the first ring of defense satellites and taking a glancing shot that cooked her starboard engines. She had aimed for water and prayed. The ship sank in a hiss and scream, and Ray clawed her way back to air with a broken rib and a toolbox in her arms. The Zapirians had been there. They pulled her onto a raft and sang to keep her awake until the pain let go. Ray had been a soldier once, then a medic, then a ship's engineer. The only job that mattered now was not leaving. A low horn rolled across the water. Heads turned. A patrol skimmer slid along the canal between ruins. It was long, white, and armed, its hull stamped with the 8-point star of the Coalition Quarantine Authority. A loudspeaker crackled and spit, then dragged out a voice in neutral trade. "Citizens of Kepler 442b, remain calm. This is a routine inspection for contraband and illegal transmissions. Noncompliance will result in immediate sanctions." Neris's fingers found Ray's sleeve and tightened. "We should go inside," she whispered. "Now." "Yeah," Ray said. "Let's go." They moved in quick steps past the pump and down the narrow walkway that cut through quarter 7's shelter maze. The shelters were half-sunken, built from the bones of the old city. Coral stone arches had been patched with ship plating and clear smart glass stolen from the Desal plants. The air smelled of salt, wet rope, and the faint, sweet rot of kelp bread baking somewhere out of sight. Neris led Ray into a low dome and sealed the hatch behind them. Inside, cool blue light rippled across the ceiling, projected wave patterns that made the underground room feel like home. 3 children sat on woven mats around a huge shell bowl, learning ink shapes from an elder. All of them had red marks on their palms. The elder's eyes flicked up as Ray entered, then softened. She touched her chest in greeting. Ray returned the gesture. "Patrol," Neris said. "Quarter 7 inspection." The elder nodded. She took a breath and the children took hers by habit. Their crests flattened and their voices fell silent. The room became still. Ray went to the back where her workbench was hidden behind an old tapestry. She swept aside cloth and glanced at the compact transmitter on the table. It was offline. She kept it that way. The satellites up there could smell signals like sharks smelled blood. Even the hum of poorly shielded circuits made them curious. "Ray," Nera said, voice thinner now, "the code stick you asked for, I finished it." She held out a small bar of cobalt metal, no longer than Ray's hand. Glyphs ran down its face in clean lines. It was a coalition authentication stick, the kind you needed to open gates and access controls on high-grade systems. Dozens had been stolen over the years, but most were scoured from orbit when found. Neris had built this one from a schematics archive, matching the way Coalition signals braided and unbraided on their network lines. Ray's throat was suddenly dry. "You're sure it will pass a handshake?" "It will pass once," Neris said. "Maybe twice. After that, the wall will notice. You told me to make a key that sings like their keys. I did." Ray took the stick gently. It was cool and heavy. Hope never weighed much in your hand. It weighed everything in your chest. "You are brilliant," she said, "and reckless." Neris's crest rose a fraction in amusement. "We are friends. Reckless is part of the music." The horn sounded again, closer now. The skimmer scraped along the outer wall. Boots hit stone. Ray's shoulders tightened. She shoved the stick into the hidden slot in her workbench and slid the panel closed with her hip. "Ray," the elder said, voice a soft bell in the dim. "If they come inside, we do not contest. We lower our eyes and make the small bowl." Ray nodded and drew a breath. The small bowl, hands cupped, gaze down, was an old Zapirian gesture of peace. It made you look harmless. It also made you look like you had no tools in your hands. The hatch banged, a fist pounded it, metal boomed. "Inspection," the loudspeaker voice said from right outside. "Open now." The elder unsealed the hatch. 2 Coalition quarantine troopers stepped in with rifles across their chests. They wore white suits with clear helmets, the kind that made their faces look smaller and their eyes harder. Their boots tracked water and grit across the woven mats. "Hands where we can see," the first trooper said. He swept the room with a narrow light that turned the color of scales into gray. The children did the small bowl. Neris lowered her eyes. Ray did not. The trooper saw her, took in the human face, and paused. The human was an insult to their box of rules. Humans were supposed to be outside the ring of iron. Humans were not supposed to be here, helping the outcasts breathe and drink. "You," he said, the word thin and flat through his speaker. "Identification." Ray kept her voice level. "Ray Morgan, civilian engineer. My ship went down during the lockdown, been here ever since." "Illegal presence," the trooper said. "You will come with us." Neris's fingers twitched against her side. The elder's eyes closed for one long beat and opened again. Ray felt heat rise in her chest, then pushed it down. She raised her hands, palms open. "Before we do that," she said, "the pump on the Q7 line is fixed. If you want to smell it, it's singing true. You can take credit for the inspection. That will look good in your report." The second trooper snorted through his nose vent. The first one's mouth tightened. "We do not need your help," he said. He pointed at Ray. "Come now." Ray took one slow step. The room was small. Her bench was 2 steps behind. The code stick was hidden there. If they searched, if they touched the wrong panel, the radio on the first trooper's shoulder clicked and squealed. He held a finger to it. A new voice cut in, harsh and fast. "Repeat, sweep readings show a spike, unregistered burst in Q7 at 026. Possible transmitter, cross the block and..." The trooper's visor tilted toward Ray's bench. Neris moved without sound. She took the shell bowl from the children and spilled its ink across the floor, a dark slick that ran like blood. She cried out, a wail so high it pushed into ultrasound, a Zapirian distress note that made human teeth throb. Both troopers flinched, hands rising to their helmets. They were trained for this, but training did not erase reflex. Ray moved, 2 steps backward, palm to panel, hidden slot open, stick in pocket, tap on the chem lamp. The room flickered. The power grid coughed. Alarms in the troopers' suits went wild, listing harmless radiation, harmless heat, harmless noise as if each were a gun. "Enough," the first trooper snapped, recovering. He shoved the elder aside and shouldered past Ray, grabbed at the tapestry and ripped it down. The workbench stood bare under the cold light. Tools, a coil of wire, a white enamel mug, a scatter of screws, nothing else. Ray had long ago learned the only safe place to hide a thing was either in plain sight or on your person. The second trooper stared at Ray. "What did you switch?" "Light," Ray said. Don't do it again. The first trooper reached for Ray's shoulder. Neris took a half step forward without thinking, and the trooper swung the rifle down in warning. That was when a second sound cut in. Not a horn this time. Something lower, wider, like a giant had inhaled, and the whole city felt it. Every Zapirian in the room went still. Their crests flattened, their pupils dilated until their eyes were nothing but deep black. Ray felt it too, a pressure change that made her lungs want to pause between breaths. "What was that?" the second trooper said, voice too loud. Neris's lips shaped one silent word: satellites. The elder turned her face to the ceiling, to the rippled light that pretended to be sea. "They are waking the first ring," she whispered. "The iron is breathing." Ray's pulse kicked. The defense ring had 3 modes: listen, warn, kill. In 3 years it had listened and warned 1,000 times. It killed rarely, but when it did, there was nothing left but steam over the water and a taste of coins on your tongue. The troopers looked at each other. The first one raised his radio. It hissed and spat, then found a channel. He said a string of numbers and the word confirm twice. He listened. His shoulders rose. "We are done," he said at last. He pointed at Ray. "You report to the dock head at dusk. Do not run. If you run, we burn this quarter." He turned and left. The second followed, eyes hard behind glass. The hatch sealed. The room breathed again. Neris lowered the shell bowl and set it upright with shaking hands. The children exhaled all at once. Ray leaned her palms on the table and felt the tremble in her arms reach the wood. Dusk, dock head, detention. She could handle detention. She had been held before. She had survived worse. But the satellites. Neris touched Ray's sleeve, small, warm. "You will not go to the dock," she said in a tone that allowed no argument. "We need you for something else." Ray looked up and met her friend's eyes. Neris rarely used that voice. When she did, Ray listened. "What did you find?" Ray asked, the engineer in her already listing tools and times and routes in the back of her head. Neris drew a breath, then crossed to a low chest in the corner. She lifted the lid and took out a slim wave slate wrapped in oilskin. She unrolled it and set it on the table. Symbols crawled across the surface in lines like fish schools, then settled into an image, a deep map of the drowned city, layers stacked in ghost blue. "I went into the old data house last night," Neris said. "The one under the coral glass archive. It is not stable, but I wanted to try again to reach the cold stacks." Ray's mouth twisted. "Neris." "I went with ropes and a safety," Neris said quickly. "I am careful, Ray. I am reckless but careful. When I got down, the stacks were dead, as always, but the stone behind them was warm. I listened. It did not sing like stone. It sang like a box of thunder." She touched the slate. The map peeled back a layer, then 2. A new symbol pulsed in red far below the city's bones. "Power," Ray whispered. "Old power." "Older than the coalition," Neris said. "Older than the colony, built by my people when our towers were new. It is asleep, but it breathes. If we wake it, we could light the whole quarter. We could send a signal they cannot silence." Ray stared at the red pulsing dot. It was beautiful and terrible all at once, a sleeping heart under a drowned city. "If we wake it wrong," she said, "we could blow half the quarter into the sky." Neris's smile was a soft flash. "Yes." A thin, bright wind slipped through a seam in the hatch, carrying the smell of cauterized air. Somewhere above, a beam had fired, warning shot perhaps, or a test. Ray looked at her friend, at the children, at the elder. The choice sat in the room like a third person. "Show me the route," Ray said. Neris's crest lifted high at last. She traced a line on the slate with a fingertip, a path through collapsed galleries and flooded vaults, through a tunnel the width of a freight lift. "Here," she said at the end. "There is a service door. It is sealed with old law. I think your new key will sing the right note." Ray felt the code stick heavy in her coverall pocket. She felt the pumps hum under her boots like a steadier heartbeat. "We go now," she said, "before the dock." They went. They moved through the maze of Quarter 7 and into the silent belly of the drowned city. The upper tunnels were lit by soft blue lamps the size of a thumb joint. The lower ones were lit by memory and touch. They passed a chamber where coral had grown into the shape of bookshelves, and each shelf still held skeins of glass thread that had once been words. They crossed a bridge that had been a music hall, its stage open to the sea now, with fish drifting through seats like a slow audience. Ray's lamp painted walls with moving shadows. Their steps were loud in the hush, and then they were not. They came to a wide cylinder shaft that fell into black. Neris knelt and tested the old ladder. It held. They climbed. At the bottom, the air was cooler and wet. Ray's lamp found a door of dark stone carved with Zapirian scripture and inlaid with metal that had not rusted. The script looked like waves and breath. Neris pressed both palms to it, closed her eyes, and sang one note. The door did not move. Ray slid the code stick from her pocket, and her hand shook once before it steadied. She found the small pane where metal met stone, pried it back, and revealed a slot as narrow as a knife. "Ask first," Neris whispered. Ray nodded. She touched the stone with her fingers and made her own small bowl. "With respect," she said to a door and a city and a people. Then she pushed the stick home. The slot drank the key and hummed. Lines lit within the stone in slow sequence like a heartbeat discovering itself after a long sleep. The door trembled. Dust fell in a soft rain. A seam opened. Air moved past their faces, the smell of old water, cold metal, and something like lightning in a jar. The door slid aside. Beyond it, a narrow walkway ran over a deep well of machinery. The walls were ribbed, the ribs stamped with glyphs that had not seen light in centuries. Far below, a dim red glow pulsed in time with Ray's breath. The sound was not a song, not yet. It was a waiting. Neris stepped to the edge and looked down with wide eyes. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. Ray did. It skated up her bones and along the back of her teeth. It was power, big and old. It could light a quarter. It could raise a shout the satellites might hear and answer with fire. It could also bear the truth to a sky that had forgotten how to look at a planet without fear. Behind them, somewhere far above, metal boomed like a slow drum. The satellites breathed again. On Ray's lamp, a tiny red indicator winked on unregistered signal detected, strength low, source unknown. The ring was sniffing. Neris turned, mouth open to speak. The walkway shivered under their feet. A thin crack zigzagged out from the door frame and hissed, water seeping. The sea wanted in. The ancient seals did not like being woken. A second tremor ran from left to right, and small chips pattered off the ceiling like dry rain. Ray gripped the rail. She met Neris's eyes. "Fast," Ray said. "Yes," Neris breathed. Ray took the first step onto the walkway. Above them, the iron ring around the planet began to spin. And in Ray's pocket, the code stick grew very, very hot. The walkway shivered under Ray's boots. The vibration wasn't random, it had rhythm. A pulse, a warning. She steadied herself on the cold railing while the red glow from below throbbed brighter, matching the beat of her own pulse. "Hold steady," she whispered. Neris's wide black eyes tracked the fissures along the stone arch. Water seeped faster now, dripping in thin streams down the ribs of the chamber. The sound was 100 small clocks ticking at once. "This place does not want us here," Neris said softly. "No," Ray muttered, "but it needs us here." She pulled a multi-tool from her belt and popped open the first inspection panel along the rail. Inside, coils and crystal rods sat in neat rows, humming faintly. None of it looked like coalition tech. It was older, stranger, like coral that had decided to grow in straight lines. Ray whistled under her breath. "Your people built this." Neris's fins trembled, half pride and half shame. "We built more than cities. Before the crimson rot, before the blockade, we dreamed of being the light in the dark. This was one of our hearts. We shut it down when the coalition marked us diseased. We thought if it slept, we would be left alone." Ray tightened her jaw. "Sleeping didn't save you." A soft sound rose from the well below, not machinery, voices. At first, Ray thought it was echoes of water, but the tones shifted, braided together, built into something almost like a chorus. Her skin prickled. "What is that?" Neris tilted her head, crest flattening. "Not voices, recordings. The old engineers left their songs in the stone. The heart remembers." The walkway groaned. A section ahead sagged and snapped back, the noise sharp in the cavern. Ray shoved the multi-tool away and pressed forward. "Then let's wake the heart before it drowns us." The control dais sat halfway across the bridge. A pedestal of black glass rose from the metal grating. Around it, clusters of crystal looked like flowers cut from frozen starlight. Ray ran her hand across the surface and felt static crawl up her arm. "It's listening," she said. "Doesn't know what to make of me yet." Neris moved beside her, laying both palms flat, her eyes half closed as she let the vibrations flow up through her scales. "It remembers us," she said with wonder. "But it asks, why now?" Ray pulled the code stick from her pocket. It was warm, no, hot now, too hot. She nearly dropped it, then jammed it against the pedestal's slot. The surface rippled like water struck by a stone. For a moment, nothing, then the heart roared awake. Light rushed through the ribbed walls, red bled to white blue. The chorus of voices sharpened into a single deep chord that rattled the air. The floor trembled underfoot. Above them, somewhere past tons of drowned stone, the iron satellite stirred. Ray's wrist unit pinged with signal noise so sharp it made her teeth ache. "They felt that," she said. Neris didn't answer. Her face was bathed in pale light, her crest fully raised, her voice a whisper of awe. "We are alive again." The stone door behind them slammed shut with a grinding finality. Ray spun. "That wasn't me." "It locked itself," Nera said. Her slate chimed. On its deep map, the red dot of the heart pulsed brighter, but now thin lines spiderwebbed outward, linking with abandoned conduits and drowned towers across the city. Energy flowing where it hadn't in years. Ray's chest tightened. "We just lit up the whole grid." "Every quarter will see the lamps glow again," Neris breathed. "And every satellite in orbit will see it too." As if answering her, a thunderous crack rolled through the deep. The walkway shuddered. A fist of pressure slammed Ray's ears. She staggered against the rail, a shockwave, not from below, from above. Neris gasped, "Orbital strike." The iron ring had spoken. Ray yanked Neris down behind the pedestal as dust cascaded from the ceiling. A second impact shook the city. Somewhere above, stone towers collapsed into the sea. The satellites weren't aiming to kill. Yet, they were warning, punishing, like a boot grinding down just enough to remind the ant it was small. Ray's breath came sharp. "We can't stay here. They'll keep pounding until this chamber cracks." Neris clutched the slate to her chest. Her hands shook, but the heart. "We keep it alive," Ray said, grabbing her arm. "We just don't stay on top of it when the sky's falling in." The walkway quivered under another blast. This time, a support beam buckled, shrieking metal echoing down the shaft. A section of grating dropped into the abyss. Ray cursed. She shoved Neris toward the sealed stone door. "Help me find another exit." Neris ran her hands over the walls, pressing, listening. At last, she struck a section that gave a different note. "Here!" she shouted over the booming above. She pressed hard, and a panel slid aside, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft. Ray shoved her through first, then crawled in after. The shaft smelled of rust and cold water. Another strike rattled stone dust into their faces. Ray's shoulders scraped raw as she forced herself forward. Behind them, the heart kept humming, louder now, as if it wanted to remind them it was still awake. The shaft spat them out in a half-collapsed archive chamber. Rows of cracked crystal scrolls lay scattered across the floor like bones. Faint blue light glowed through a fractured ceiling where seawater pressed against transparent plates. The plates trembled with each orbital strike, spiderweb cracks racing across their surface. Neris staggered to her feet, still clutching the slate. "The heart is not finished," she said. "It will not shut itself down now. It is tied to the city again." Ray swiped grit from her mouth. "Then we've just painted a target the size of an ocean for the Coalition." Bootsteps. Both froze. The sound came from the far side of the archive, sharp and metallic. Ray reached instinctively for the wrench on her belt. Neris dropped low, crest flat. Figures emerged through the dust. White helmets, rifles, Coalition troopers. "Contact," one said into his helmet mic. "We've found them." Ray's stomach dropped. How had they? Then she remembered the patrol skimmer, the threat at the dock. They hadn't left quarter 7 empty. They followed. The squad fanned out, rifles raised. The leader pointed. "Human, drop the tool now." Ray's knuckles tightened around the wrench. Her heartbeat thundered against her ribs. Beside her, Neris whispered, "If they take us, they take the heart's map. They bury it again." The leader barked, "Final warning." Ray raised her hands slowly. The wrench slipped from her fingers and clattered on the cracked tiles. She let them think she'd given up, but her other hand brushed the code stick in her pocket. It pulsed with heat, alive again. And when she looked up at the troopers, Ray Morgan smiled. Ray stood still, her palms raised. The Coalition troopers fanned out across the cracked archive chamber, white helmets reflecting the faint glow of seawater pressing against fractured glass above. Their rifles tracked her and Neris with steady precision. "Human," the squad leader repeated. "Step forward slowly." Neris's crest lay flat against her skull. Her whisper was a hiss. If they take us, the map dies with us. They will seal the heart again. Ray kept her gaze fixed on the leader, but her voice was low enough for Neris alone. Then we make sure they don't take us. She flexed her fingers slightly. The code stick burned hot against her thigh pocket. She didn't know what it was trying to do, but she knew power when she felt it. Move, the leader barked. Ray obeyed half a step forward, slow and measured. She stumbled deliberately, hand brushing the floor. Her wrench still lay there, just within reach. The troopers' rifles tracked every twitch. Careful, one muttered. Ray's mind raced. Soldiers were the same everywhere, whether human or alien. They watched the hands. They feared the unexpected. She could work with that. Listen, Ray said, voice calm but hard. You don't want to do this here. The leader tilted his helmet, puzzled. Ray nodded toward the cracked ceiling. That glass goes, the ocean comes down on us. All of us. You want your report to say your squad drowned chasing a half-dead engineer and a sick alien, or do you want it to say you lived long enough to get promoted? Silence stretched. Neris's eyes darted from trooper to trooper, her scales tight with fear. The leader's jaw tightened behind his visor. You'll come either way. Ray sighed. Yeah, thought so. And she moved. Her hand snapped down, wrench in her grip before the troopers could blink. She swung it in a wide arc, smashing into the leader's rifle. Metal cracked against composite. The weapon jerked sideways, fired once, and the shot tore into the already fractured ceiling. The world groaned. Water thundered against weakening glass. Idiot, one trooper shouted. The leader cursed and lunged, but Ray was already rolling sideways. Neris darted low, clutching the slate to her chest. The squad opened fire. Blue energy bolts lit the chamber like lightning, punching holes through stone shelves and sending crystal scrolls bursting into shards. The ceiling cracked wider. A jagged line raced across its surface. Drops of seawater pattered down, each one heavy as a hammer. Ray, Neris screamed. Ray scrambled behind a collapsed pillar. Shots ripped into stone around her. She thumbed the code stick in her pocket. It pulsed like a living heart. She had no idea what command it held, but she jammed it into the nearest console port anyway. The archive walls flared to life. Glyphs burned bright across stone. The floor vibrated. From deep below, the awakened heart answered the code stick's cry. A surge of energy blasted outward. Every trooper's rifle went dead. Their suits sparked, visors dimming. The leader shouted in confusion, slapping his weapon. Ray rose from cover, wrench in hand. Guess the heart doesn't like uninvited guests. Neris's crest shot high with something close to joy. But the victory lasted only seconds. A thunderous boom shook the chamber. Not a rifle, not the heart. Orbital fire. A lance of plasma slammed into the city above. The shockwave traveled through the stone like a giant's fist. The cracked ceiling shattered. Water exploded inward. The chamber became chaos. A wall of black sea rushed down, sweeping troopers, debris, and shattered scrolls alike. Ray felt herself lifted, spun, crushed. Salt water filled her nose and mouth. She fought to kick, to breathe, to think. Neris's hand closed around hers, strong, desperate. The slate was still in Neris's other arm. She refused to let it go. Together they were dragged through a collapsing tunnel as the chamber imploded. Troopers vanished in the flood. Light blinked out. Ray's chest screamed for air. Her lungs burned. She kicked, searching for space for any opening. Then light. A broken grate yawned ahead, spilling them into open water. They shot through, bodies spinning. Ray clawed upward, following the faint shimmer of the twin suns through the sea. Her ribs ached. Her vision dimmed. They broke the surface with a gasp that tore her throat raw. They floated in a half-collapsed canal, coughing seawater. Around them, the drowned city burned. Orbital fire had struck the upper towers. Plumes of steam rose skyward, black against the bright suns. Neris clung to the slate, her scales glowing faintly in the light. They mean to finish us, she rasped. The ring will not stop. Ray dragged herself onto a broken ledge. Not if we finish first. Sirens wailed through the quarters. Zapirian civilians scrambled across skiffs and rooftops, eyes wide with terror. Some sang distress notes that shivered the air. Others simply stared at the sky, where white streaks of descending fire cut through the clouds. A patrol skimmer rounded the canal corner. Coalition troopers aboard, rifles raised. Ray staggered to her feet, wrench still in hand. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind sharpened. She was done running. "They want us dead," she said, voice ragged but steady. "Then we show them what outcasts can do." The skimmer closed in fast, engines whining. Neris stepped beside her, water dripping from her mantle. Her crest rose. Her voice was fierce despite the red lesions across her neck. "Then we fight." The skimmer slowed, rifles leveling. Ray tightened her grip on the wrench. Neris raised the slate. And above, the iron ring began to glow. The skimmer roared closer, its prow cutting the dark canal like a blade. White-armored troopers stood at the rail, rifles humming with charge. Behind Ray, frightened Zapirians huddled on broken balconies, their fins trembling in panic. Ray spat seawater and planted her boots on the ledge. "We hold here," she growled. Neris clutched the slate to her chest, eyes wide. "Ray, there are too many." "Then we make them regret being enough." Ray hefted her wrench, muscles burning. The first rifle shot cracked the air. Ray dropped to one knee instinctively. The bolt tore stone where her head had been. Shards stung her cheek. She surged up, swung the wrench, and smashed the skimmer's bow light. The metal shrieked. Sparks spat into the air. Neris lifted the slate high. Glyphs rippled across its surface, alive with the hum of the reawakened heart. She pressed her palm against it, sang a single sharp note. The canal water obeyed. A wave rose, unnatural and sudden, slamming into the skimmer's side. The craft bucked, nearly capsizing. Troopers shouted through their helmets, scrambling to keep balance. Ray leapt. She landed on the skimmer's rail, driving her wrench into the nearest trooper's helmet with a hollow crack. He toppled backward into the water, rifle vanishing with him. The others opened fire. Bolts hissed across the deck. Ray ducked, felt heat scorch past her ear. She swung again, caught another trooper in the ribs, armor dented. He wheezed and went down. But there were still more. Neris's crest glowed faintly as she pushed the slate to its limit. Water surged again, dragging one trooper clean off the deck. The last two steadied themselves and aimed at her. "No," Ray shouted, charging. She slammed her wrench into one rifle, forcing the shot wide. The second trooper fired. And a Zapirian civilian dove from a balcony, colliding with him in mid-shot. Both went tumbling into the water. The civilian's song note rose, defiant even as plasma fire scorched the canal's surface. The skimmer spun out of control. Ray grabbed Neris's hand. "Jump." They leapt together, hitting the water as the skimmer smashed against a collapsed tower. It exploded in a burst of steam and flame. Ray and Neris surfaced, gasping. Around them, cheers rose, raw, desperate, but real. Zapirians sang in tones that vibrated through the broken stone, a song of resistance. "They see us," Neris said, voice trembling. "They see we can fight." Ray grinned despite blood in her teeth. "Then let's give them a reason to keep singing." But her grin faded when the sky cracked. A burning lance fell from orbit, slamming into the far side of the drowned city. A tower of steam rose, blocking out the suns. The satellites weren't bluffing anymore. "They're escalating," Ray said, chest tight. "They'll burn the whole quarter if we don't stop them." Neris raised the slate, eyes wide. "The heart, it speaks louder now. We can reach beyond the ring. If we broadcast the truth, proof the crimson rot is not a plague, maybe the galaxy will listen." Ray dragged herself onto a floating slab of stone. "Then we need a beacon." Neris nodded. "The old Sky-Spire." Ray frowned. "What's that?" Neris pointed to the ruins at the city's center, a jagged spire still jutting above the waves, leaning like a broken tooth. "It was our star tower. Once it carried songs to ships across the system. The heart can flow through it." Ray followed her gaze. The spire was half shattered, tilted, surrounded by collapsing towers. It looked like death waiting to fall. But it was high, it was visible, and it was the only chance they had. They rallied the civilians of Quarter 7. Zapirians armed with little more than tools, fishing spears, and shards of coral steel joined Ray and Neris as they pushed through drowned streets toward the spire. The coalition wasn't blind. More skimmers prowled the canals. Drones buzzed overhead like hornets, scanning and relaying positions. Every step was hunted. Ray improvised. She rigged broken pumps into makeshift steam traps that erupted when drones flew low. Neris guided civilians through submerged tunnels too narrow for skimmers to follow. Each move bought them minutes. At last, they reached the plaza beneath the Sky-Spire. It was worse up close. The spire leaned at a dangerous angle, riddled with holes, its once bright crystal veins dulled to gray. Storm clouds gathered above it, glowing faint from orbital fire. Neris clutched the slate tighter. If the heart flows into the spire, the whole system will hear, not just the coalition, everyone. Ray looked at the civilians, faces marked with red lesions, eyes burning with fragile hope. Then we climb. The first shot hit before they reached the base. Coalition dropships screamed overhead, deploying squads onto rooftops around the plaza. White-armored soldiers poured into cover, rifles blazing. Civilians scattered for shelter. Some fell, others fought with spears and desperate courage. Ray hauled Neris behind a collapsed arch. "Go, get that slate to the top." Neris shook her head violently. "Not without you." "You've got the song," Ray barked. "I've got the wrench." She shoved the tool into Neris's hand for a heartbeat, kissed her knuckles, then snatched it back with a grin. "See you at the top." Neris's eyes glistened, but she nodded. Crest high, she sprinted toward the base of the spire. Ray surged out of cover, wrench spinning, leading a handful of desperate Zapirians in a charge. Plasma fire ripped past her, burning holes through stone. She roared anyway, the kind of roar that wasn't about courage but about refusing to quit. She slammed into the first trooper, wrench cracking armor. A civilian speared another through the thigh. The plaza became a storm of smoke, screams, and the clash of tools against rifles. Above, Neris climbed, hand over hand, clutching the slate against her chest. Every slip threatened to hurl her into the chaos below. Her breath came ragged, lesions burning, but she did not stop. The satellites glowed brighter, aiming. And as Ray smashed her wrench into a rifle butt, she looked up and saw Neris near the top, silhouetted against fire and storm, slate raised high. That was when the iron ring spoke again. A single lance of plasma descended, aimed straight at the spire. "Neris," Ray screamed. The world lit white. The sky turned white. The lance from the iron ring carved down like the wrath of gods. It struck the skyspear near its base, blasting stone and crystal into molten shards. The ground heaved. Half the plaza collapsed into the sea. Ray was thrown backward, air punched out of her lungs. Her ears rang, her ribs screamed, but she forced herself up. Above the fire and smoke, she saw Neris still clinging to the leaning spire. Somehow, impossibly, the upper half still held. The slate glowed in her hands like a star. "Neris," Ray bellowed, her throat raw. Neris didn't answer, she climbed. Coalition troopers poured into the shattered plaza. Their white armor gleamed against smoke and fire. Their rifles spat blue bolts into fleeing civilians. The air filled with screams and the sizzling hiss of plasma meeting flesh. Ray's rage cut through her fear. She swung her wrench into the nearest trooper's helmet, denting it inward with a crack that made her hand jolt. The soldier crumpled. Ray snatched his rifle before it hit the ground. She wasn't a soldier anymore, but muscle memory was older than scars. She leveled the rifle and fired. Blue bolts punched through two more troopers. Civilians rallied behind her, hurling spears, stones, anything they had. "Hold them," Ray shouted. "Buy her time." Above, Neris climbed through smoke and shards. Her crest lay flat, her scales stung with burns, but her eyes never left the peak. She pressed the slate to the spire's cracked veins. It hummed. She sang, low at first, then rising, clear despite the chaos below. Her note matched the slate, matched the heart far beneath the city. The spire pulsed with ancient light, veins glowing blue as though they remembered what they once were. The song spread, carried not by air but by resonance. The spire sang to the heart sang to the slate, and the slate began to scream across the void. Up in orbit, satellites twitched, their sensors locked onto the signal. Protocols screamed, unauthorized broadcast suppression required, weapons charged again. On the planet's surface, coalition troopers cheered at the glow in the skyspear. They thought the ring would finish it this time. But the song was faster. It leapt into subspace before the next lance could fire. Not plague, the signal carried. Not contagion, radiation sickness, proof in gene maps. They abandoned us for nothing. The truth raced outward, across the blockade, across the stars. Every listening ear, every hidden receiver, every outlaw relay caught pieces of it. The lie was breaking. On the plaza, Ray's borrowed rifle overheated. She tossed it and went back to her wrench, slamming into another trooper with all the fury she had left. Around her, Zapirians fought with desperate strength. Civilians bled and fell, but they did not scatter. They sang as they fought, songs of defiance that rattled the stones. A plasma bolt scorched Ray's shoulder. Pain flared white-hot. She staggered. A trooper raised his rifle for the kill shot and collapsed as a spear drove through his back. A Zapirian youth wrenched it free, nodding at Ray before diving back into the fray. Ray gritted her teeth, forcing herself upright. She wouldn't stop, not now. She looked up just in time to see the second lance fire. The spire took the hit midsection. The blast severed half its height. The tower screamed as it split, raining shards like meteors. Neris was still there, clinging above the break. Her song wavered but did not stop. The slate blazed, brighter than the suns themselves. Ray's heart seized. Jump, Neris, jump. But Neris looked down, saw Ray's face through smoke and fire, and shook her head. Her crest flared high, proud and defiant. She sang louder. The spire collapsed. Stone and crystal fell in an avalanche of destruction. Neris vanished in the storm of debris. The song cut off. Ray screamed until her throat tore. She clawed toward the wreckage, shoving past falling shards and burning rubble. The coalition troopers stopped firing. Even they stared, stunned by the destruction. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of steam and the distant sobs of civilians. Ray dropped to her knees among the smoking fragments. Her hands bled as she shoved Stone aside, searching. Neris, Neris. Then light. From under the rubble a glow pushed outward. A shard lifted. The slate rose, cracked but still blazing. And Neris's hand followed, bloodied, burned but alive. Ray dragged her out, clutching her against her chest. Neris coughed, scales scorched, but her eyes still burned with fire. The song, she rasped, it went out. Ray kissed her forehead. Then you just changed the galaxy. Above, the satellites shifted, their weapons primed for another strike. But across the comms, voices erupted. Human, Zapirian, alien, dozens of languages carried the same demand. Cease fire. News feeds and pirate relays already carried the broadcast. The proof spread faster than plasma. If the coalition fired now, they would not just kill outcasts. They would kill their own legitimacy. Admiral Vixmore himself appeared on the skyfeed, face hard and pale. "Shut it down," he commanded, but his fleet hesitated. Ships wavered in formation, some powered down weapons. The lie was crumbling. On the plaza, troopers received frantic orders. Some lowered rifles. Others looked at Ray with confusion in their eyes. Ray staggered to her feet, Neris leaning against her. She raised her wrench high. "You see," she shouted, voice raw but carrying. "They can't hide it anymore. You've been lied to. We are not plague. We are not poison. We are people, and we will not die quiet." The civilians roared in answer. Their song filled the plaza, defiant and unbroken. The troopers hesitated, some stepping back, some tearing helmets off in shame. But above, the iron ring still glowed. Admiral Vixmore would not surrender so easily. And Ray knew the next move would decide whether Kepler 442 be lived or burned. The sky boiled with fire. The ring above Kepler 442b glowed like a crown of iron, every satellite spinning into full combat mode. Admiral Vixmore's voice barked across the system-wide channel, translated into every tongue. The contagion must not spread. All assets prepare the Omega Protocol, sterilize the planet. On the plaza, the words fell like a death sentence. Civilians froze, troopers stared upward. Even the air felt heavier, as if the order itself crushed the lungs. Ray gritted her teeth, tightening her grip on the bloodied wrench. She pulled Neris close, whispering in her ear, "Stay awake, don't you quit on me." Neris coughed, scales raw, but her eyes were steady. "The galaxy, they heard us, they know. Even if we die, the lie dies too." Ray shook her head. "No, not dying here, not like this." Above the planet, Vixmore's dreadnought Dominion charged its planet killer. Energy gathered in its core like a false sun, growing brighter by the second. But not all ships obeyed. Across the fleet, hesitation spread. Captains muttered in their bridges, crew whispered in their mess halls. The broadcast had reached them too. They had seen the proof. They had seen civilians bleed and fight, not plague, not monsters. One by one, transponders flickered red to blue. Coalition ships broke formation. An Alarian frigate swung wide, shields shifting not toward the planet but toward the dreadnought. A Crystal Vex cruiser powered down weapons, refusing the order. The Xmor's bellow shook the comms. Traitors, you will obey or you will burn with them. But the tide had begun to turn. Down on the plaza, a rumble built in the east. Engines, deep human engines. Ray turned and felt her heart lurch. 3 ships burst through the clouds, contrails blazing. The UES Liberty, the UES New Dawn, and the science vessel UES Discovery. Reinforcements. Humanity had come. Civilians cheered. Even some troopers dropped weapons, staring upward. The Liberty dove low, scattering coalition skimmers with railgun fire. The New Dawn deployed drones and engineering pods, shielding civilians with hard-light barriers. And from the Discovery came a calm voice across the open channel. This is Captain Helen Parker. We have analyzed the Zapirian genome. We confirm the Crimson Rot is environmental, not infectious. Coalition Command has lied to you. Stand down or stand judged. Ray laughed through tears, lifting Neris higher so she could see. Told you we wouldn't die here. But the ring was still charging. The Dreadnought's false sun swelled, casting shadows across half the hemisphere. One shot would turn oceans to steam, towers to dust, and songs to silence. Options, Ray muttered, scanning the battlefield. She spotted the broken spire still sparking with residual energy. Its veins glowed faintly, connected to the heart beneath the city. She looked at Neris. Can the heart push higher past orbit? Neris's crest lifted weakly. Yes, but it would burn itself empty. Then we make it count, Ray set her jaw. We need to punch a hole through that ring, enough for the fleet to get inside. Neris's eyes widened. Ray, if the heart releases that much power, the city. I know, Ray cut her off. But the city's already dying. The people are. If we survive this, we rebuild. Neris swallowed hard, then nodded. They dragged themselves back into the canal tunnels. Civilians followed, singing low, defiant songs that echoed through stone. The path trembled with each orbital strike. At last they reached the heart chamber again. It pulsed like a wounded animal groaning under the strain of the first awakening. Cracks webbed the walls. Water leaked faster now. Ray limped to the pedestal, wrench hanging at her side. She slammed the code stick back into its slot. Wake up, old friend, one more time. The heart responded with a roar. Energy surged through the chamber, rattling every rib of stone. The chorus of old voices rose again, this time deafening, as if all the city's dead had come to sing at once. Neris pressed her palms flat and added her own voice. Her song braided with theirs, high and piercing, carrying the proof of survival. The heart blazed. In orbit, the satellites twitched, their sensors overloaded. For the first time in centuries, the iron ring staggered. Half its platforms spun out of sync, their targeting scrambled by the resonance. The human ship saw the gap. Liberty moving in, Captain Rodriguez barked. Her ship dove through the disrupted ring, railguns blazing. Coalition ships tried to block, but the New Dawn and Discovery flanked, pouring fire into the wavering blockade. The battlefield became chaos. Ships broke from the Xmor's command, defecting mid-fight. Old allies turned guns on one another. The Dreadnought Dominion stood alone at the center, its false sun still charging. On the planet, Ray staggered as the heart's energy seared through the chamber. Cracks split wider. Stone rained from the ceiling. It's working, she shouted over the roar. Keep pushing. Neris's voice climbed higher, tears streaking her scaled cheeks. The slate glowed like a second heart in her hands. The pedestal exploded in light. A beam erupted from the city's depths, spearing upward through water, sky, and orbit. It lanced straight into the Dreadnought's core. For one heartbeat, silence. Then the Dominion ruptured. The false sun imploded, swallowing the flagship in a blast that tore half the iron ring apart. The shockwave slammed through atmosphere and sea. Towers toppled. Waves rose like mountains. The heart chamber split wide, water crashing in. Ray grabbed Neris, dragging her toward a rising current. Hold your breath, she roared. The flood swallowed them. They tumbled through black water, battered by debris, lungs screaming for air. Ray clutched Neris with one arm and reached upward with the other, toward the faint shimmer of light. At last, they broke the surface. Behind them, half the drowned city vanished under boiling waves. But above, the ring was broken. Human ships flew free, coalition survivors scattered. The Dreadnought was gone. The sky was not iron anymore. Ray dragged Neris onto a floating beam, both coughing salt water. Around them, Zapirian survivors clung to wreckage, singing broken but defiant songs. Neris touched Ray's cheek, her hand trembling. We lived. Ray pressed her forehead to hers. We more than lived, we won. But as the survivors cheered, Ray looked up and saw the distant flicker of retreating coalition ships. They weren't finished. They would regroup. They would try again. This war wasn't over. But for the first time in 3 years, Kepler 442b was free. The smoke cleared slowly. Kepler 442b's twin suns rose over a shattered horizon, casting long shafts of light across steaming seas and half-drowned towers. The iron ring above was broken, jagged arcs of twisted metal tumbling through orbit, burning as they fell into the atmosphere. For the first time in 3 years, the sky was not a cage. Ray stood on the cracked steps of what had once been the city's grand archive. Her clothes were scorched, her shoulder bandaged hastily, her wrench still strapped to her belt. Beside her, Neris leaned heavily against a carved column, wrapped in kelp fiber to hide burns. Her crest fluttered weakly but proudly in the morning wind. Around them, Zapirian survivors sang as they worked. They pulled wreckage from canals, tended wounded, and raised banners of deep blue cloth atop ruined towers. Every note carried defiance, but also hope. Ray looked up. Human ships hovered low, their hulls reflecting sunrise. Dropships ferried medical kits, rations, and engineers. For once, humans weren't just explorers or warriors, they were guardians. That afternoon, a council gathered on the plaza, rebuilt in hours by sheer willpower. Representatives from defected coalition crews stood uneasily beside Zapirian elders. Human captains formed a ring, their uniforms torn but their voices strong. Civilians crowded every balcony and rooftop, eager for words that might decide their future. Admiral Susan Hayes appeared via holo from Earth Command, her sharp features softened by pride. "To all who hear," she said, her voice echoing across water and stone, "the truth is proven. The Crimson Rot is no plague. The Coalition abandoned a people out of fear and lies, but humanity does not abandon. Today, the outcasts of Kepler 442b are outcasts no more." The crowd roared, songs and cheers mixing into a wave of sound that shook broken walls. Neris's eyes shone as she looked at Ray. "They see us. At last they see." Ray squeezed her hand. "Yeah, took nearly dying, but they'll never forget now." Up in orbit, the trial began almost immediately. Coalition commanders who had survived were placed under guard. Streams of data poured into every system, proof of falsified reports, false medical claims, and years of manipulated fear. Vixmore himself had escaped in the chaos, but his power was gone. Species that once obeyed without question now tore up their treaties. The coalition crumbled piece by piece, its authority collapsing faster than its ships had burned. In its place, whispers spread of something new, a compact of free species, not built on fear, not enforced by blockade, built on trust, born in the fire of Kepler 442b. Weeks later, the first compact summit convened. Ships of every shape and color ringed the skies above New Geneva, humanity's young colony world. Ray and Neris stood together at the great conference hall's entrance. Ray wore a patched engineer's jacket, refusing the medals she'd been offered. Neris wore a mantle of woven kelp and silver coral, her lesions almost healed. Inside, ambassadors spoke, alliances formed, and history shifted. But Ray barely heard it. She was watching Neris, watching how her friend, once marked as untouchable, now stood in the heart of galactic politics, her voice respected. When Neris addressed the hall, her song voice carried without shame. "My people were condemned by lies," she said. "We survived because one human chose compassion over fear. Let that be our law now, compassion first." The chamber erupted in agreement. Ray felt her throat tighten. She had never wanted to be anyone's hero. But if being stubborn, reckless, and human had saved even one child, it had been worth it. That night, Ray sat on a balcony overlooking New Geneva's port. Neris joined her, carrying 2 steaming cups of kelproot tea. They sat in silence for a long time, watching ships depart for their homeworlds under starlight. Finally, Neris spoke. "Do you think it will last, this peace?" Ray sipped, grimaced at the bitter taste, and shrugged. "Peace never lasts forever, but hope, that sticks around if you fight hard enough for it." Neris leaned against her shoulder. "Then we will fight together." Ray chuckled softly. Engineer and singer, wrench and slate, not the worst team. Above them, children's laughter echoed from the station's gardens. human and Zapirian, running side by side, no fear between them. Ray looked up at the stars. Once they had been cold and distant. Tonight they felt closer. "Outcasts no more," she whispered. And for the first time in years, she believed it.